Good evening and welcome to a brand new live Coronation Overreaction on YouTube, Facebook, and X. I was doing that a few times last night at Memorial Stadium. We're less than 24 hours from the finale, the final horn buzzer, the end of the game last night, Nebraska, Colorado. I'm pumped to talk about. I was surprised when I'm driving back from Lincoln, Nebraska today, and I'm talking with Haas. We're all talking on the phone, and he's like, "What do you think about doing this live?" And I said, I'm for it, but it's got to be tonight because we don't want to, we're going to be getting into Northern Iowa week, whatever the hell that looks like. But let's say hello to my my esteemed guest, friend, co-host and guest. Anyway, this gentleman needs no introduction, and after 7 years of sharing a computer screen, it was amazing to break bread with my longtime buddy and broadcast friend, Husker fan, Haas Reuter. Haas, how are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm really good. And to piggyback off what you said last about it's good to break bread, Greg and I have done a lot of podcasts over the years, and we've
hours and hours, countless hours of podcasts.
Highs and lows, more lows than highs for Husker football. And, from that, we also struck up a friendship where we talk, when it wasn't podcast stuff. So after 7 years, him and friend of the show, Josh, met up with myself and my girlfriend, Katie, at Laszlo's in the Haymarket. And we had a good meal. They clowned me for ordering a salad at Laszlo's. It was a salmon and guacamole salad. It was delicious. But after that, we went to Kincaidor, and that's where the real fun began. But I am just happy that you were able to have a great first experience at Memorial Stadium. I mean, that beats the hell out of going to Nebraska, Troy State in 2002 when you're 11 and watching Nebraska stumble against Troy State, and you have to convince yourself that Troy State was good. But one thing I took away from that game was Jamal Lord and DeJuan Gross were both phenomenal players.
It was, anybody who saw the link, the event for this, whether it was on Facebook, on YouTube, etc. And I, on purpose, put a picture of the two of us because it was important, that hey, we're marking this occasion. And if you had only ever listened to this podcast and you had no idea that this is Greg and that's Haas, and you look at that picture, be like, yeah, I know which one ordered the salad and which one didn't.
Well, after stadium food the night before in Arrowhead, when I watched the Chiefs beat the Ravens, I think I felt like I needed a detox because nothing sits in your gut like a lead ball, quite like some Kansas City barbecue and a salted pretzel with whatever cheese filled with a bunch of different chemicals created in a lab, will do.
Well, we're going to introduce our guest who was here
needs no introduction after last week.
2 weeks ago.
Shit, time flies.
Big Game Jake. And by that, because he wants to be on the show all the time, and no offense to him, we want him here all the time, but we're really going to wheel him out for special occasions. And by God, when you take care of business, defend the home turf, and you beat Colorado 28-10, and I don't want anybody to get injured, but when you knock out both the Sanders kids, that's Big Game Jake Day. Jake, how are you, buddy?
Good. Feeling good after the win. We're going to get it. We'll break it down a little bit more, but a win is a win. And I definitely, if you would have told me the score before the game yesterday, I would have been happy with it. So
that's what I think is the most fascinating thing about this game. As I feel the same way, and obviously, as you mentioned, we'll get into it. We'll break it down a little bit more, but there was felt like just a little bit of an asterisk next to it.
Yep.
We want to recognize the good folks who are in the chat. Tiger Shark Diver, who, by the way, come to find out, the TSD makes the rounds on all these Husker shows. Hear his name quite a bit in some of the, I don't want to say the distinguished competition, but Tiger Shark Diver says GBR. That was a 7:32. A few minutes after that, at 7:40, Highlander Gun says GBR. And in the top 25, finally, we will definitely get to that, Highland. Don't you worry.
One more win, and they call that a winning streak.
Aaron Keene says, gentlemen, and Greg. Thanks for that, Aaron. Fred Sacco's fourth. By the way, Fred was down there at Kincaiders, made the trip down from the Omaha area. We'll say greater Omaha area. We don't know. We don't want to give his exact location away. So, Fred, it was great to hang out with you. And everybody who came out to our little gathering there at Kincaiders Friday night had a blast. I was talking to Josh and some of the other coordinators. I felt guilty because I want to try to get it to everybody, so I didn't stay in one spot too long. I just wanted to make sure that everybody who came out to this was essentially my brainchild. Just wanted them to know that I appreciated them making the effort to come out. So let's see. Michael Lawson says, can't wait to hear Haas's take on this game. Oh, you will. Justin Raji, good GBR, good evening. Dan Wheeler says, this defense is for real. The offense will do what it needs to this year. Very balanced in that regard. Better than we've had in a long minute. Special teams, however, another story. Well, we'll talk about that because I was, I think the kicking on the special teams is probably the more concern. Brian Buschini, I will get into it. I think he had a phenomenal night last night. Averaged over 50 yards a punt and put Colorado in some real bad situations. Let's see. James Boardman, who was there Friday night as well. James, great seeing you and having a beverage with you. Greg sounds like Dr. Sanguinary. Must have yelled. His voice cords raw. It was bad. I was telling Haas, every defensive snap, we were on our feet. We were fortunate enough, Josh and I, that the people behind us were also on their feet. People around us, in front of us, don't care. Trying to be respectful of the people behind me, but they were on their feet the whole time, and there was a wall behind them. So very fortunate enough that, I was like this every defensive snap, and I'd like to think it worked. Like, they're like, you know what? We hear Greg, and this is his first game in Memorial Stadium. We better ball up.
I bet Gion's like, oh, shit, it's Greg.
I'm going to save this one, DJ, for later because that's definitely end of the game conversation. Charles Hewlett asks how many people got pregnant last night. I did not. So I can't speak for these guys, but I definitely am not with child. Josh is here, says, my voice still completely gone and got worse for some reason.
Hey, Josh.
Let's see. Wrinkly Beef, I have no voice, and I think I'm just as sore as some of the boys. Let's see. Highlander Gun says, I'm late, but we won, so who cares? Highland, you're here. You were early. That's fine. I do remember as Colorado was leaving the field in warm-ups, they were going over to the student section. They were chirping, and Mike says, leave it to CU players to flip the fans off before the game and talk smack and lose. I'm adding in the and lose part. Aaron says, who's that old Tony White was probably like, who's that old lady screaming on every defensive snap? Let's get into this. Nebraska wins the coin toss, defers, and kicks away to Colorado guys, and call it the Ty Robinson show. Mm-hmm. It was his. You caught some. I don't know if you guys listened or watched his post game presser, but I think this one was pretty personal to him. Although they don't admit it. I think after last year in Boulder, he wanted to go out and have a statement game. And I know had a sack, had a blocked field goal. I think he had another deflection. He was everywhere. And that if you are next level scouts, if he wasn't on your radar before, and he should have been, he just put himself, I think, on every NFL team's list.
Yeah, and I think he's been there for quite some time. I think he probably would have been a top 2 to 3 round draft pick last year. As Tony White said in the Chasing 3 series over the offseason, Nebraska, they're happy to have him back on the roster for this season. And there's 32 teams in the NFL that would have been ecstatic to have him on the roster. for this fall too. He dominated the game. He took over the game as a game wrecker. And, when a lot of people say, can this defense be better than 09? Statistically, through 2 games, yes, they are actually. Limited sample size, I know. But at the same time, like, Ty Robinson might be that guy that when fans say, hey, can this be better than 09? We don't have that singular superstar on this defense. Ty Robinson might have the potential to grow into that superstar as the year goes on. Not saying it's going to be in Ndamukong Suh levels of, taking over a game completely, but, this guy is no slouch. I mean, you can see why Nick Saban got on a plane in December of 2018 while he's prepping for the college football playoff and flew to Scottsdale, Arizona to recruit this guy.
Wow. Jake, the way the game
yeah,
I'll be doing that a lot tonight.
I don't mean to interject, but Jake, you're the only one here on this panel that watched it on TV.
Yeah.
And I've always said there's a lot that gets lost being at the game. It's kind of missing the forest for the trees. I'd love to hear the context that you got from watching it on TV as opposed to us sitting in the stands.
Yeah. Ty is also getting held at pretty much every play in that game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one of these fans where you blame ref. We see some comments on on the sidebar. The officiating was horrendous. There were calls on both. It wasn't. I feel like we got the worst of it, but it was both bad for both teams. I mean, yeah, Ty is absolutely dominant.
No goals.
I mean, in every facet of playing that position, he's dominant that way. So, and he's not he doesn't put up the big stats. I think he had 1 sack, 2 tackles, and a blocked field goal. Like, you look at it on paper, you're like, but his impact on the game is immeasurable. Outside of Raiola, probably our biggest recruiting win of the season last year was getting him to come back.
Oh.
So
I agree.
And
him and Hutmaker, I never know which one to say. Those guys, their ability to control the middle is just ridiculous. Something you don't see in college football these days with how it's such a skill position heavy game. It's hard to mature in the trenches on both sides of the football because of the transfer portal. Those guys being able to collapse the interior and force the offensive tackles to step inside or keep their kick steps real tight, that's what frees up edge rushers coming around the corner, which we'll get into. The James Williams should have been sacked because I have some opinions on that as well. But that defensive line, by the time it's said and done, I think this defensive line is going to go up as one of the greatest all time at Nebraska. It's going to be in the Pantheon.
I mean, look, not to say that it's too early for that comment, and I definitely hope you're right, but we always know there's a lot of football left. And the biggest thing, especially as we get into October, November, Big Ten football, is just make sure we keep guys healthy. Now, what I saw last night was we brought in, it seemed like Ty and Nash kind of stayed. They were the anchors, but we brought in a lot of rush ends, I feel like, to, keep legs fresh. Was that a misdiagnosis, a misobservation?
No, not at all. I think that's very accurate. And it's kind of like a hockey team having shifts. You're able to keep guys fresh. The most snaps a defender played against UTEP was only 18. And then going into this game where it's very much basically playing an air raid team. I mean, it's amazing that Colorado didn't decide to try to mix in the run. Not saying they had a whole lot of success when they only finished with 21 yards. But this played right into Tony White's hands with wanting to be able to play pressure, play coverage, and being able just to flip back and forth. And anytime you can get pressure with just 4, you are going to be successful when you're blanketing the field with defenders and coverage. So not a missed observation at all. The defensive line controlled this game, and the depth is a big reason why. When you have Kai Wallen, Willis McGahee IV, James Williams, guys who aren't even full-time starters, are affecting the passer in big ways. That's a deep team. I think there's 126 teams in Division I college football. I bet there's 123 other teams in the country that would kill to have the defensive front 7 that we have.
And you mentioned, like Willis McGahee IV. This is a young man, true freshman, who, like, he made an impact, but not full-time, not regular. I don't even think he played against UTEP, or if he did, again, it was late. And that's not a kid you even think about redshirting, is it? I mean, Are they worried about games for some of these guys?
I think that's only natural. I mean, again, James Williams was a guy that played his 4 games last year, and then they redshirted him. And I still think that that's a guy that could have helped us win against Wisconsin and Iowa, especially being able to stop Tanner Mordecai on those quarterback draws. So I think if he can help you win games, I mean, why put off till tomorrow, what can help today, play them as much as they can.
Aaron Rostovsky, another Coronation guy who got to see both nights, Friday night and last night after the game, says never want to see Ty and Nash on the sideline at the same time in meaningful snaps. That's how Colorado got started for their field goal. So, I mean, those are 2 big bodies. I mean, I called them the bookends when the single-digit image came out because you have Nash at 0, Ty at 9, and a lot much smaller guys in the middle. But like Jake, definitely because the way that they play and how they eat up, bodies on the offensive line, it's tough to be as effective defensively if both those guys are on the bench.
Yeah. Jake, go ahead. Take this one, man.
Yeah. I mean, I think you got to have one of those guys in the game, at least one at all times. And not to backtrack, but we do have a lot of depth, especially at edge rusher. And, Ty and Nash are going to get a lot of the attention and a lot of the credit, as they should. But let's not forget number 11 and number 18. Princewell and Lenhart are studs at rush end, and they're game wreckers too. And the more I think about it, this is the best defense we've had since 2009. I don't think that is any fans really going to question that. I mean,
no.
Look, think about how complete. Yeah, 09 had soup, but think about how complete that defense was. We're complete. Where are we deficient this year?
Exactly. And 09 didn't have the depth that this.
No.
09, we were razor thin on depth, actually.
You were one injury, one flu week away from having I want to call it department. I know it's not that one position group that is not going to be able to show up as strong on Saturday.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Like when you look at this year compared to 2009, everybody remembers that 09 Oklahoma game. We beat them 10-3. Defense was on the field for probably 38 minutes in that game because our offense couldn't do anything. Oklahoma racked up a ton of first downs, but they just couldn't score in the red zone. And then a week later, we played Kansas, and they scored 17 points on us. And, I mean, Todd Reesing and Jake Sharp and Tobin Opram were good players. I think Kerry Meyer might have been on that team still. And that defense looked gassed in that game. And that was where I remember the concern in 09 was a lack of depth, could be the undoing because we didn't have an offense that could get the defense, some rest. But it's a testament to how good they were that they just kept delivering. But this year, when you have an offense that's capable of playing just even average football, like what I would say we saw last night, average offensive football, C- to C+ football, you have a defense like we do, you're going to win a lot of games. How many times have we all said, hey, if we would have had Joe Gans in 09, Nebraska beats Alabama for the national championship? Not saying we're there yet. Not saying we're going to win the whole 12-teamer. I'm just saying, playing complementary football, this team has shown good indications so far that it can do that.
We're giving a lot of love to the defensive line, but Josh with a couple of comments here. He said Bullock had an insane game, especially in the second half. Met some of those 4th and 1s where the running back took the handoff. I don't think the. All right, this is it's a football term, but there are certain elements in our filthy animals here on the reaction show who are going to say the penetration in the second half was. I know you're welcome.
We really penetrated the A gap.
I think he had an outstanding game.
I do want to add one thing real quick to what that mentioned about John Bullock. And Jake, you said this to me almost a year ago.
Yep.
I think during the Maryland game. You called it back in 2019, was it? Spring game of 19? That you thought John Bullock was could be a great player for us.
He was wearing number 85 at the time in that spring game. He was a true freshman from prep. And I didn't know who he was, looked him up, and I'm like, I told Haas, I said, mark my words, this guy is going to be a hell of a player. And I was going to get to him because, I'm like, we're going to give all the love to Nash and Ty. Let's get to some of the other guys. Bullock's.
He's a football player.
Incredibly athletic and physical, and that's a testament to the defense as a whole. I think what's separating this defense a lot, when you talk about comparing some of the other great defenses you'll see are good defenses, the willingness to be physical and meet your opponent at the point of attack.
Yep.
Mark Buford is an absolute animal. That guy loves contact.
Seeks it out.
And Travis Hunter might be the best player in the country, so I'll take what I'm going to say with a little bit. Just I'm saying, he doesn't look like all the time he wants to really get in there and mix it up.
He made a few business decisions.
Yeah, Dowdell might have been charged with like attempted murder if Travis would have fought for him. So that was a good choice to back up. Dowdell hunted Shiloh Sanders down.
Yeah, you see that one clip that he points at him as he's coming to the sideline. Just and that's the attitude about Husker football that
I love it
so long. Like people always think the 90s were like this, like humdrum. We're gonna run fullback dive 50 times a game. We're just gonna shut up and play ball. No, they had a little bit of Miami to them, in terms of, I don't want to say they're doing the over the top celebrations, but the nastiness that Nebraska had. And I'll say this as we're talking about the comparisons of all-time great defenses. Maybe they're not 09 with a singular superstar like Sue, but this team's definitely like 99's defense, which if you go back and watch some of the stuff, in 99, there's a great interview that Jack Arute has with Osborne right before the Texas game in 99, where Osborne says that it's the best defense he had ever seen at Nebraska, through all the years that he had been there. And that's a defense that, who do you point to as a singular superstar? Kyle Vandenbosch, Carlos Polk, Mike Brown, Ralph Brown. Steve Warren. Like, those were guys who were very, very good football players, and some of them played for a long time in the NFL, but they weren't like historically dominant like a Sioux. So I think this year's defense is probably the best comparison to them is 99's. And 99's defense would have shut down Michael Vick or Florida State in the Sugar Bowl.
So I want to just and I'll get both your guys' opinions on this, but Haas, I got a message from he's a self-described Corn Nation lurker, but he was also the one who told me where to find Yingling Light. So you owe him a thank you. He says, enjoy the game. He said, I was at the 200th sellout and sat at the 45-yard line in the East Stadium balcony. He said, I watched Christian Peter in warm-up. He was a sophomore. I knew then Colorado had no chance that day. When you say that Dowdell's going and like pointing to Shiloh Sanders, that's that kind of mentality when you're talking about the 90s were not Nebraska nice. It were
gotta have some dirtbag in you.
Yeah. So I just want to point that out.
Game. It's a nasty game. Like, it's supposed to be fun. It's not a contact sport. It's a collision sport.
It's a combat sport.
Yeah. That's a good way.
It's more out there. Yeah. And the Peter brothers were probably certifiably insane, and they were great players. And but I love seeing this brand of Nebraska football. And Dowdell, he's kind of, at least on offense, he's the poster child for it, man. He stiff arming, he's physical. I think if he would have tried to make a move on Shiloh, he might have actually, maybe he could have scored. But I'm glad he didn't score. I'm glad he ran him over. I'd rather that happen.
If he would have made a move on him, it would have reminded me a lot of when Jonathan Taylor buzzsawed Joshua Kalu as a freshman when Wisconsin beat us in 17. And honestly, watching Dowdell, he reminds me of Jonathan Taylor a lot. Not just the jersey number either. Not just the obvious optics. He runs very similar to him. I'd love to see him start getting some breakaway runs, which, Jake, we talked about this last night. The receivers blocking downfield, Ron Brown's got to start working with the receiving core.
Yep.
Block downfield. They're costing us explosive plays.
Greg, what's the next topic? Because I want to talk about receivers.
Well, before we do. While we're talking about Dante Dowdell, High Mountain Guy says Dowdell wants to finish dudes like their attempt to tackle him is disrespectful. He's a different dude. Love to see it. It is a different mentality. I mean, and this is not taking anything away from any of these guys, but, Amir Abdullah, Rex Burkhead. I mean, we've had, and I don't think none of those guys had a problem lowering the shoulder, but I always, in my mind, because I'm a gentleman of a certain age, I always view two types of running backs. There's the Barry Sanders running back and the Jerome Bettis. There's the one who's going to dance around you, and there's the one who's going to go through you, And Dowdell seems, at least right now, he wants to be the go through you type.
Run through a motherfucker's face.
It may be better for a long-term career to learn how to go around him. Jake, what do you think?
He's explosive too. I mean, he hits the hole. He's established himself, I think, in this game as our number one. 17 carries, 74 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he looked the best. Ramir played well too. I think he had 9 carries for around 30 yards, 33.
Ramir's kind of turned into just an overall offensive weapon.
He was also our leading receiver.
Yep.
And I'm not thrilled about that.
No, and adjusting it for what happened in the game. You got Travis Hunter on Jamal Banks taking away our number one. Okay, I get it. Travis Hunter's a dude.
Absolutely.
But then from there, I'm seeing a lot of lazy routes being ran, not a lot of crisp cuts from the receivers. I'm not seeing a whole lot of good. And again, the filthy animals out there are gonna have a heyday. Not seeing a whole lot of good get-offs from the line of scrimmage at the snap. And I'm just kind of for the most part, I like Garrett McGuire as a receivers coach. I thought he showed really good development with the young receivers last year. But this year, it just seems like they're leaving money on the table, so to speak, with their lack of concentration.
Yeah.
There's a lot of – it's just the mental side. Because Lord knows they're all physically gifted.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't thrilled with the way the receivers played. It's just like under the previous staff where your quarterback is your leading rusher every year. It's not a good look. The leading rusher should be a running back. The leading receiver should be a receiver.
Yep.
Aaron made a comment. I was going to talk about Mike Allstott. That is exactly right before we went live. That I was on Twitter just kind of killing time, and I saw obviously the clip of Dowdell from last night where he runs over Shiloh. I'm not comparing him to Allstott, obviously, but that's what Allstott used to do. He would hunt down his prey and just take souls. It's awesome.
Impose his will.
Yeah.
No, this is great. Aaron's comment here again. If you're not watching, if you're just listening to this next day or whatever, like the old school commercial from the late '90s, work done runs through holes. Mike Allstott creates them. And I'll say this, and because I know we want to talk more about the receivers, but before we go, is about Dowdell is I don't know if my expectation of him coming in was going to be as quick as he is. But like you said, Jay, he hits he hits that line hard. And he, like you guys said, he has established himself as RB1, where, I think just a couple weeks ago, we all thought it might be Emmett Johnson. And Emmett Johnson, real quick on the stat card.
He got a few snaps last night, but not much.
He had one carry for 3 yards. But at the end of the day,
Uh-oh.
Greg, bark twice if you're in Milwaukee. All right, yeah. So Emmett Johnson, man,
Emmett.
Go ahead.
So Emmett, this is kind of what I know. Emmett's a different type of back. He's much lighter. He's more of
a slasher.
Like a one-cut type of back. But that's really what I expected from him, not Dante, because of the reports out of practice was it's Emmett or Ramir or Gabe or Dante, but it seemed like Dowdell was the fourth on the list. Pretty much that was the consensus coming out of fall camp. And he just has, I think, pretty clearly established himself as RB1.
Well, I think that with him establishing himself as RB1 is a big testament. One, when those numbers started coming out the start of fall camp that he's a 550-pound squatter, that he benches 225 31 times. And you start looking at it, you're like, okay, we haven't had a guy like that at the position since Amir. Devine got into shape for his senior year, but he was not the physical specimen that Amir was, that Rex Burkhead was, that those kinds of backs were. And so when you look at that, you're not going to be able to keep a guy off the bench. People always want to say, well, the measurables don't always matter. Well, yeah, they don't always matter, but they sure as hell help. They're a big majority of it. It really primes, the athlete to be successful.
I got one quick aside on that. Oh, sorry, Haas. I didn't.
No, go ahead real quick.
Tom Brady posted on his YouTube channel the other day. He did his first bench max, and since he said like his early career with the Pats, he benched 255.
Yep.
Tom Brady, and he looks. I mean, yeah, the form's not great. It's not like bodybuilder reps, but he took 255 and threw it up and racked it. Does Tom Brady look like he should be able to bench in the mid 200s? No, he's an athlete. Athletes that are explosive, even though you wouldn't describe Tom Brady's explosive, they're playing at such a high level of their sport. They are explosive, even guys like that. So anyway, yeah, Dowdell's a weight room animal.
Yeah, weight room animal. And I think a big thing about his performance last night, and what was it, 17 carries for 74?
Yeah.
So I think there was a psychological component that fed into the thought process of this game plan where Colorado, to quote Buddy Ryan when he was the defensive coordinator for the Oilers, was they're running the chuck and duck pretty much. They don't even pretend to want to run the football. It's just throw it 50, 60 times a game. So I think that Rule's game plan really was to take a toll on them as well psychologically by punching them in the mouth repeatedly, making their asses. Saban has one of my favorite quotes of all time. I forget. He said it years ago. But he was mic'd up in practice, and he's like, you got to keep hammering them until you make their asses want to force quit, like somebody rage quitting a video game. And that's exactly what happened. When you run a 220-pound back at somebody repeatedly, when you crack the safeties with your receivers, and you isolate corners like Shiloh Sanders and Travis Hunter on a big back who has legs that are going to hit them right in the chops like a buzzsaw, it turns into a psychological game of who wants it more. I mean, that's the thing. Like, Deion Sanders as a corner didn't like to come up and run support, but I'll give Shiloh a tip of the hat here. He stuck his nose in there. He stuck his nose in the fan. It resulted in a broken arm, but he still came up and run support.
He's not a coward.
Travis Hunter made some business decisions. I don't blame him. I think that Deion is doing the kid a disservice. Playing it both ways. He's a receiver. He's got Randy Moss type talent as a receiver. Play him at receiver.
They don't hit him in practice
in the NFL at $165.
Yeah, they don't hit him in practice either. I don't know if you guys heard about that.
Yeah, he's off limits.
He wears a green jersey. He's a position player in a green jersey. Don't hit him.
It's like what the kid from Colorado State lacerated his spleen, liver. And freak things happen, like Jonathan Vilma hitting Ben Zychek in the 0-1 Rose Bowl and lacerating his liver. That happens. But I think anyone who's ever played football will agree that there's an acclimation process to contact, in football. That's why you go half rack for a few days when you're starting out in, camp, 2 a days. We had 3 a days at Gretna. So we kind of built up to it. And then that third day you put on full gear, you're separating the men from the boys at that point. You got to get your body conditioned to take in contact.
Calloused.
Yeah, you callous, just like you callous them, your hands, you got to callous the mind, you got to callous the body,
Being in football shape.
Yep.
Those are the bruises you play through them. Sorry,
great.
No, that's good. Big game, Jake. Question for you here from James. Well, yeah. I'm directing it to you from James Boardman about philosophy on the offense or offensive strategy. Do you think the offense might be too predictable? We run more often when Dowdell is in there and pass more often when Ramir is in there.
I don't think that's really the case when it comes to – I don't think that's the factor with predictability because they'll run with Ramir and they'll run between the tackles with Ramir.
Ramir's a good short yardage back too.
He is. I did take a little bit of issue with some of the play calling early on in the game. When we were running the ball with success, and I know you want to get Dylan going. You want to get him comfortable. You want to get him, acclimated to the game, that get him some quick passes, completions, get him in a flow and a rhythm, get those jitters out. Why are we throwing the ball? We're ripping, we're gashing them. I mean, and then we're throwing the ball, and I didn't agree with that.
I feel like, if I can interject real quick, Greg, I felt like a lot of the play calling got so conservative from a standpoint of feeling snake bit about turning the football over. And it kind of went into just a shell just to get the fuck out of Dodge with a win.
Yeah.
I was going to say, do you think they maybe felt, for lack of a better term, obligated to, you've got the freshman with the golden arm, let's, X number of so many plays, we better throw some passes in there because we're paying for it, type of thing.
Not really.
No, I don't think so. But.
And I felt like Colorado's defensive coordinator, Rob Livingston, he's the former DB's coach for the Bengals. I thought he made really good adjustments in the second half. I actually don't think Colorado's defense is quite as bad as we thought it was going into the year.
Jake, you want to talk more about the receivers? Because we kind of put our toe in that water, and then we're like, oh, shit, let's Dante Donnell. So.
Yeah, I kind of already summed up my feelings on that. If you're, Jamal Banks, 2 receptions for 2 yards, non-factor. Nayor looked not very good. And those guys are good players. So, I don't know. It felt a little bit – Dylan did what he was asked to do, I think. It's hard to like articulate. It didn't seem like we really were going to make big plays happen to the receivers last night. Watching on TV where you have the wide angle and you can see the, ball gets down and everything, there was just nothing off the line. And again, I'm like, well, we're running the ball with efficiency. Let's just keep running the ball.
Yep.
We got 4 backs. We got 4 running backs that can all tote the rock. Let them go and let them wear Colorado down. And I feel like we kept kind of leaving the door open by dropping Dylan back,
And I kind of felt like along with that, when we were dropping him back, there were opportunities in the passing game, but it goes back to receivers running lazy routes. Aaron Murray, the former Georgia quarterback, touched on this earlier this week when he did a little film breakdown of Raiola. And he said, hey, like Raiola's good. Those receivers kind of hung him out to dry against UTEP a few times.
Yep.
We also got, speaking of Raiola, and got bailed out, dare I say, there late in the first half, where a pass that by all intents should have been intercepted. But again, the good Lord in his infinite wisdom wanted to make sure that old Greg's drive home on Sunday, that 6.5-hour drive, was a happy one, because the Buffalo defender bounced off of him, and Ramir Johnson said, oh, thank you. And we'll, by hook or by crook, we'll take any of those. But that moment really crystallized for me, like, gosh dang, we're not the bad luck Huskers anymore. It felt like, we were finally starting to get, a few lucky bounces our way.
On that point, I wanted to highlight some rules said in the post game, if I may.
You have the floor, Senator.
There was something that resonated with me, and at one point earlier in the presser, he said he was asked a question about comparing the game from last year and this year, and he said last year had to happen for this year to happen. Sometimes bad things have to happen to you so that the old you can die and the new one be born. And not to be like poetic or gushy or whatever, last night kind of felt like that. I mean, talking about the luck thing, the ball, Ramir, hell of a job staying with it, but we're not the bad luck Huskers. The ball, it bounced our way and we scored. And the optimism, my whole life has not been, as a Husker fan, and one of the other big media outlets earlier this week was talking about how it feels like the turning point of the program was the 0-1 Colorado game. Mm-hmm. We lost badly. Does it kind of feel like a pretty commanding victory feels like the other bookend, where that was that period of time that was dark in Nebraska history? Are we on the upward trajectory? I feel like we are.
I feel like we are too. And I always go back to the Mark Twain quote, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does tend to rhyme.
Yes.
What you mentioned. And I saw this on the message board that I belong to. Somebody posted before the game when I was just getting to Lincoln last night or yesterday afternoon. And it said, this game is for all you guys who are too young to remember the glory days, but you kept showing up every Saturday with blind faith. And I feel, and Jake, I know that you feel the same way too. There's a level of vindication from this game. We finally did not shit the bed in a big game. We didn't start a game where we're down 14-0 3 minutes into the first quarter because we can't stop stepping on our own dick, as the expression goes.
When the I do not have TSD. I do not have camo comforters on my bed. I don't know if it's the patriotic.
Probably one for Christmas, Jake.
Thanks. The patriotic shirt, maybe the dip tobacco that I've been trying to discreetly use, but no camo comforter. That's on my guest bed actually. No. Anyway, that's two wins where we did what we were supposed to do. And I predicted a much higher scoring game preseason, but I predicted a 21-point victory. It was an 18-point victory, albeit much lower scoring than I thought. I kind of thought this is what should happen. And I'm not a genius or an expert or anything like that, but I'm not going to turn around and now that we won, try to act like Colorado is some kind of really good team. I said in the preseason predictions that we did a couple weeks ago, I don't think they're going to make a bowl game. And I still don't think they're going to make a bowl game.
I do think they're improved over last year. I'll give them that.
How much? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they still got to get out there and play the games, and now they're dealing with a lot more physical-ass teams in the Big 12.
And I mean, I think we did what we were supposed to do. This is the first time we've taken care of business in 2 games in a row, and since I can really remember.
Yeah, since 2016. First time since we've been 2-0.
And if I'm not mistaken, that would have been – those weren't against Power 5 opponents, were they?
Nope.
This is the first time it has to be since, like, Pelini that we've done it again 2-0 against at least one of them being Power 5.
Yeah, I saw some stats. I screenshot it earlier this week. 2 games in, again, admittedly not against the strongest of opponents, but these are early signs about where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
17 total points allowed is the fewest in the first 2 games since 2009 for Nebraska. Last time that Nebraska allowed this few in the first 2 games, with at least one of them being a Power 5 foe, was 2005, Wake Forest, when they only scored 10 points. The last years before that were 2003 and 1999. Again, it's early, it's a limited sample size, but just to put into perspective, 2009, we were obviously first in scoring, pass efficiency defense, 7th in total defense, 9th in rushing defense, 2nd in sacks. 2005, Kevin Cosgrove put together a defense that was first in the country in sacks, 2 away from breaking the NCAA record.
50,
first in TFLs. 54 was the number. 2003, we are the first in turnovers forced and pass efficiency, 2nd in scoring. 99, 6th in rushing defense, 2nd in pass efficiency, 4th in total defense, 3rd in scoring defense. So we're on track.
Yeah.
Awkward. Greg's looking like a fish.
Oh, his mic's not. Well, to fill that while he figures it out. That's why I think that we do have the now I'm a homer. Obviously, we know that.
There's no other way to be.
I'm a homer, obviously, but I like the way that this roster is constructed.
I do too.
The way it's constructed, with our schedule setting up, potentially can make some noise in the Big Ten. And I mean, outside shot. Now we're game 2 against two opponents I would consider not the best competition, but outside shot at the playoffs. Maybe just our defense is that good.
Yeah,
offense we'll see.
just get there. You know, like I sent you that link today about Stuart Mandel has his bracketology for the 12-team playoff. And it's a little premature in week 2, but when you see Nebraska as an 11 seed playing Bama as a 6, it's nothing more than something that's cool to see. It's not like it's going to happen. You know, it's not like it's going to happen next week. But just to be in the conversation shows that this team's already made some growth. But, I mean, moving forward from Colorado, you got to start looking at a standpoint. And there's still some other things I want to talk about with Colorado. But just before we get into those, moving forward from Colorado, Northern Iowa is a game that you should do what you're supposed to do. Plain and simple. No excuses. Get it done. You know, that Illinois game's a huge game. It's taken on, honestly, by the time we get there, it's going to be maybe not up to the terms of Colorado in terms of just pure hatred for the other team, but the implications are going to make it a bigger game, in my opinion. Because, you know, Brett Bielema is going to have that team ready to play.
Yeah.
Well, I'm back. My
nice
screen, I had muted my microphone because my mouse makes very loud clicks, and I was on a different tab and it froze, and so I couldn't unmute myself. Everything you guys say, I completely agree because I got preoccupied and was only half paying attention. I do want to share this though. Hey, look, we appreciate everybody joining us from wherever. I think this is Sunday night. People have to get up and go to work tomorrow. There are almost 700 people watching us. One of them is doing it with a Yingling and a cigar.
Hey.
And I'm not going to say who that is, but he knows who he is, and he is appreciated. Y'all are appreciated.
Friend of the show, Josh, I bet.
I wasn't going to say it. I guess you can say it. There were only so many of those cases of Yingling being distributed because of parking downtown that I couldn't be like, yeah, let's meet over at the van and here, take the case. But I did, oddly enough, carry a case from essentially Haymark. I mean, it was right there, Tavern on the Square, all the way to the stadium, to a tailgate.
Well, congratulations. You didn't get Musburgered.
No. But it was closed. It was warm beer, like it hadn't been refrigerated yet. And it ended up at the Omaha Steaks tailgate. And they're like, do you want to put that in? I'm like, I don't think there's any room. None of us is cold. Oh, we'll just put it in the fridge. I said, I just wanted to contribute to the, I keep it. I'm not going to take it in the stadium, obviously. So gave away a case of Yingling to the Omaha Steaks people. Maybe that'll come.
People, you should run for mayor of Omaha. You'd probably be more successful than the current one.
I don't know anything about it. We're not going to get into it.
Yeah, politics. I will say, as I know a lot of people watching Sunday night, I don't think we're trying to go 2 hours, 45 minutes on this one. One of the things that I really loved in this Colorado game, I've been saying this to both of you guys since we first saw him debut last season. James Williams is a future first-round draft pick. That first step is insane, and that was not a neutral zone infraction. He was just that fucking fast getting off the line of scrimmage.
I remember that play, and I thought, again, not to be a homer, but from my vantage point, which was midfield, I had pretty good.
Yeah, you were a little lower in the altitude than I was.
Sorry, but it just looked like he timed it exceptionally well.
He's an explosive player.
I don't want to draw comparisons to a player on one of your least favorite teams, but what?
He got cut.
Who are you talking about?
Are you going Randy Gregory playing for the Broncos?
No.
Are you going TJ Watt for?
I was going to say TJ Watt.
I was saying Randy Gregory too.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. Jake. Not that.
I thought we were going with that.
Not that son of a gun who cost us going 8-0 and the no call on Jordan Westerkamp in that game.
Sorry.
By the way, both of you guys are right. That was a bullshit call. It's on TV. Absolute crap. Those referee. I mean, that
we take like the last bit of the show to rant about the refs.
Well, the last thing I would say is that call, the holding call on Justin Evans. That whoever threw that flag should be ashamed of themselves. That was embarrassing.
The holding call on Ben Scott on Ramir's touchdown run.
Oh,
Shameful.
Since when's a pancake block a holding penalty?
I actually have a somewhere in here. I have a comment about just that. Let's see. Here we go. Tiger Shark Diver said we had 3 pancake blocks that were called as holds.
Yeah.
It's like, do they not know what the offensive line is supposed to do? Is put the other guy, down on the ground in a form of a pancake block. Like knock him out, take him out of the game.
Speaking of blocking, on one of Dowdell's early runs, we ran a duo play. So we're trying to get double teams rotating weak side away from the point of attack. And so Mazuka and Benhart had a deuce block, a combo block on the B-gap defender. Benhart's caught a lot of crap over the years, as a player here. Him and Mazuka on that deuce block, they had this guy blocked into the next county. Like, they played really well in the run game. Wish that level of execution would have continued in the second half. I felt like not only was the play calling very vanilla and ultra conservative in the second half, I kind of felt like mentally this team came out of halftime thinking they already just had it won. And in a sense, yes, they did. But you just got to keep attacking. Until the clock hits 0, you just keep attacking. And you know what? Pour it on as much as you can on another team.
Well, here's the thing. If you go back and listen to Raiola's post-game comments, I mean, he pretty much said that. He's like, yeah, we knew we had it won. I mean, that's paraphrasing, how it, but the attitude that he was giving is like, yeah, I mean, we had it in the bag, and I don't know if it was a play call situation or what, but they did. Like, I wanted them to just keep their boot on Colorado's throats the entire game, and yeah, a lot of big plays got called back for bullshit penalties, but it just seemed like at some point they started leveling off, and I wanted to go full high octane all 60 minutes.
I agree. And when refs are disrupting the flow, that doesn't help, as Megan points out. And then on top of that, I just think that if you got an opportunity to embarrass a team that took every opportunity to rub your nose in it the year before, you take that opportunity every time.
Yeah. I
remember people freaking out about Mike Leach running up the score on Nebraska in 2004 and 70-10. I'm one of those people, if you don't like it, stop it. It's that simple. Like, if you don't like it, stop it with running up the score, I don't think that you should ever punish backup players for getting an opportunity to score when they're in the game. And I don't think you should think that it's in poor taste for an offense to continue operating their offense as they normally would when they're up big. If they need to work on the passing game, work on the passing game. Now, if you're going for it and faking punts on 4th down when you're up 40, yeah, that's a dick move.
Right.
But, running your offense is just running your offense. It's that simple. I would have preferred to step on their throats.
Yeah. I have 2 comments that I show a lot of appreciation for our right guard, and I want to highlight them here. One just came across a couple of moments ago. Aaron Rostovsky says Mazuka's hands are so massive it looks like he's wearing boxing gloves. Can't imagine what his initial punch to the chest on a defender feels like. And then about a half hour ago, Jason Reeves says Mazuka's a killer. There's a reason we kept running right.
Shit, and if anyone wants to see how good of a boxer he is, go dial up that Florida-Tennessee game from last year. He squares up with a Tennessee defender.
You mentioned Bryce Benhart, and he's kind of been much maligned the last few years, especially that last year, which I guess would have been Donovan Raiola's first year, 22, the last year of Frost. I mean, he really took some shit, and we were talking last year about how he's made some great strides, and now I mean he's more snaps than any Husker peer, or not more snaps, more starts
than any Husker ever.
And he's just adding to that total every week. But like, Jake, kind of take me through your roller coaster, your glass case of emotions with Bryce Benhart over the last few years.
Yeah, obviously at first it's, young guy, young player, started very early in his career, obviously, and didn't play great, and thought that his sophomore year, I thought he would be a lot better, and he just didn't feel like he ever really developed. And he was kind of out there starting all these games because we just didn't really have anybody better. He wouldn't have all these starts if we would have had something, but he kept starting and playing. And luckily enough, he's really turned into a really good player. If you look at PFF grades, he's grading out really well so far this season. So he's an NFL player. He'll be a probably fifth-ish round pick.
I agree. I think he's a Sunday guy. He's got the measurables, and I think that this staff's done a really good job to get bad habits coached out of him from previous staffs and develop him, in their own way. And I think that, in a sense, he gets a bad rap because he takes such a vertical kick step when he's dropping back out of his stance on pass plays that people think it's easy for defenders, especially a 9 technique, to loop around him. Really, it's just he's so long that he just needs to drop straight back instead of gaining depth and width at the same time with his kick step.
If he wasn't also like a ESPN top 150 player, if he would have been a 3-star guy coming out of high school, I think people, fans would probably think a lot more fondly of his career.
The Marlon Lucky treatment.
Yeah, Marlon Lucky would have been remembered much more fondly if he wasn't, which is a terrible comparison anyway, because they were much different players, but the next Adrian Peterson.
Yep.
There is not a next Adrian. There's never going to be another Adrian Peterson. He was his own, but I mean, that was a terrible comparison. He wasn't the type of player, but yeah. Also, one last thing about blowing out your opponent and not running up the score. I always think this is stupid because they're allowed to keep trying to get back into the game, but you're supposed to, for some reason, not keep scoring to make sure they can't get back in the game. I run up the score. Beat them 90-3 if you can. That's my opinion.
If you don't like it, stop it.
Put up 1,200 yards of total offense if you can do it. I do not care. It's a brutal game. We're not here to hiss, And these kids are professionals now.
Yeah.
They're not amateurs anymore. Yeah.
That's right. I don't know if you guys I don't know if you guys have ever watched Ted Lasso.
Mm-mm.
No, Jake. Okay,
No.
I'll move on then. It's a reference. It's a Ted Lasso quote, but it's a reference that will be lost on you guys. So, by the way, watch Ted Lasso. It is
Apple TV.
It is so worth. It's so good. Maybe for me, it may be my favorite show now of all time, and that's tough. I mean, I got onto The Office late, and I love The Office, but I'm also a gentleman of a certain age where Boy Meets World was kind of awesome, at the time.
Let's go.
Anyway, watch Ted Lasso. Seriously, it's a remarkable show. But you're right, Jake. They're professionals now. By and large, most of them are receiving some sort of monetary compensation that's above board. It's not under the table in a McDonald's bag, anymore. So there are certain expectations that we hope to see. There are certain benchmarks that we got to get over the hump. We have to hope to see certain criteria on a Saturday, or as we'll see here in a couple of weeks with Illinois on a Friday night. There's a certain level of how they conduct themselves on the field between the opening kickoff and the final whistle that, they are starting this group, what Matt Rule has been building now for the last almost 48 months, too many months, 24 months is a raising of the standard. The standard was here for decades, and then the last 10 years, it's not. I mean, the expectation is high.
Standards.
The expectation was high, but the reality was piss poor. What Matt Rule has done is he's started to really inject, hope, for lack of better terms. And while some will say it's the hope that kills you, I prefer the Shawshank Redemption version of hope, and that is hope is a good thing, perhaps the best of things, and no good thing ever dies.
I want to build off that real quick. I think that when you're talking about the standard and you're talking about how the standard was up here for so long and then it was down here and the Scott Frost had no standard. I think that the biggest thing that shows the rule turnaround the past 24 months is, unlike other coaching changes that we've had in the past where there's players that are holdouts for the previous regime, this locker room that's been under rule has shown that there's no scraps in their scrapbook for the previous regime.
Right.
Where you're not hearing the same stuff about, like when Riley took over, there were a lot of Bo guys in the locker room. And when Frost took over, there were a lot of Riley guys still because, they liked the way that Riley did things. When Frost was fired, you've never seen a single player come out in support of him.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? You don't hear it publicly. You don't hear it privately. It's one of those things where they all knew that they were not getting the best development they could get because it was a rudderless ship that had basically, sailed into the rocks, And so at this point, I think when that happened, that was one of the best things that could have happened in Nebraska football so far because it allowed a fresh and complete reboot, the reboot that we always needed.
It's like with your cell phone, when it's all messed up, you got to reset to the factory settings,
Exactly.
And that's why, we talked so much of the conversation the past week was the difference of the approach, the difference of philosophy, how Matt Rule's building this program from the foundation up. And, Deion Sanders is going into the portal and flipping his roster, trying to get, what he thinks he needs. Jake, I guess we have a better measuring stick for that this year because last year, it was so early in both of their approaches, but now with the benefit of added time, not to say it's something that we all didn't anticipate, but it does seem like the Matt Rule approach is definitely set for better longevity.
CU fans agree. You take the if you take the temperature
Love it.
If you take the temperature on social media this morning, tons of compliments to the way Matt Rule has done things and a lot of frustration with the way Deion has done things. Basically mirroring the same sentiment over and over. Look what Rule has done in Nebraska with his approach, and look what has happened with our program so far.
I talked to were you done with your thought? I don't want to cut you off, man.
No, yeah, I'm good.
I talked to a Colorado fan last night waiting in line for the men's room, which anyone who sits in North Stadium, 35 and 36A, woof, that's the worst setup for a bathroom ever. You're talking cross line waiting in line for the bathroom here, cross traffic coming out of a concourse here. It's a nightmare. But Colorado fans standing next to me for 10 minutes, and finally I'm just like, where are you from? And he's like, Colorado. Yeah, no shit. You're from Colorado. Like, where? He's from Colorado Springs, went to CU. Actually talked about how he doesn't care about the Broncos or the Nuggets or the Rockies. He's just all CU. Loves college football. It's refreshing to see with some CU fans. And so I asked him, I'm like, what's your stance on Deion, man? And he actually said verbatim that Colorado sold their souls to Deion because of the elimination of traditions. At home games, they don't play. The marching band does not play their fight song after CU touchdowns when Shedeur scores. They play Shedur's rap songs from his rap album.
Oh, geez.
There's been some talk about how Deion wants to eliminate the Ralphie run at the start of the game and have a different entrance. That's iconic in college football. I hate Colorado. I hate OU, but the Sooner Schooner and Ralphie are iconic, And so, it was nice to hear a CU fan say, he's like, I don't like the guy.
Can you guys imagine any other coach in the country wearing his own branded?
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine Matt Rule coming out in a hoodie that said "Rule the Day" on it, or like?
Hey, we had frost warning shirts all over the state about 7 years ago.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we had the frost warning shirts and all that, but I don't know. It's just to me, it's just a little weird to rep your head coach's like personal brand on like officially licensed, like you're supposed to play for University of Colorado. You're not playing for the University of Coach Prime.
Right.
And like all attitude aside on Colorado, it's one of those things that it's like that's a historic power in college football. They won a national championship in '90. They put together a lot of good teams. They put a lot of guys in the NFL. They couldn't sustain it, and they couldn't blend the talent like, say, Nebraska could together. And by and large, there were years that Colorado was probably on average just a little bit more talented than Nebraska, but they couldn't build teams. But to see a program sell their soul to an absolute charlatan, absolute fraud like Dion, like if it wasn't Colorado, I'd actually feel bad for him. But because it's Colorado, it's like I have no sympathy for these guys. You made your bed, now you go lay in it.
Yeah.
To his credit, Deion Sanders is consistent. He has been the same way for the last 35 years.
He's a consistent narcissist.
But at that point, you should know that he's going to be the same way to you too. Oh gosh dang. Whoa, I'm trying to think of this. Well, I heard a story today about, and this is not present. It's not Nebraska. But there was a football player who was going around and basically had worked his way through half a sorority house. Again, I don't even know the guy's name. I don't know what school it was. That's not relevant. But you start getting to that second half of the sorority, you should know, like, hey, he's probably going to be the same way. Now, to this guy's credit, he had a conversion moment, changed his life around, stopped being that way. But that's not Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders is who he is. Talk about the Romeo Crennel. He is who we thought he is. I'm sorry, that's not right. That's Dennis.
Dennis Green.
Thank you. Gosh dang it.
When he's with the Cardinals, yeah.
Apologies.
They are who we thought they were, and we let them off the hook.
But that's Deion's shtick is Deion's shtick, right? I mean, he's not.
Well, I was thinking of the quote from the show Justified, one of my all-time favorite shows, Timothy Oliphant and Walton Goggins. You run into an asshole in the morning, you run into an asshole. You ran into an asshole. That's it. You run into an asshole again in the afternoon, chances are you're the asshole. You keep looking around for people with some weird persecution complex, it's probably you that's creating the problem for yourself.
Do we want to spend a few minutes bitching about the officiating?
It sucked.
Mike says at 9:10, describes it as absolutely horrendous. James Boardman says, I wish my parents held me as much as Colorado. That's a great line.
Yeah, Ty Robinson. I mean, what they were doing to him is sexual assault in some states.
Let's see. I thought there were plenty of comments about the officiating. I think we got a few of them. So here's a little bit of a kind of surprise to see it. This individual is a Colorado fan and was very busy in our Thursday night 5-Heart podcast chat. And High Wisdom says, good game, you Corkers won. CU was outcoached, outplayed. You deserved that win. Now, I wasn't sure that High Wisdom was going to come back because High Wisdom was chirping quite a bit. So,
High Wisdom.
Yeah, a little nodule of respect your direction. Aaron Rostovsky says just on par for the course for Big 12 refs. And I love Matt Rule's line in his presser last night. He said, they're Big 12 refs. I don't think they can find me. And how does that work that a Big 10 school and a Big 12 school play at the Big 10 site and you still get Big 12 refs? Is it based on availability? Because I feel like there should be more Big 12 crews or Big 10 crews.
If you are going to play a school in the non-conference, as the visitor, you get the officials from your conference.
I didn't know that.
So, like, if you're going into a hostile environment, you're going to play on the road, that's a built-in advantage for the home team. So to kind of level that out, they bring in the officials from the opposing team.
Well, that's horseshit.
You're telling me.
At least last time, like, my God. I know we talked about some of the holding calls that were not holding. And I know, Jake, you mentioned or maybe Haas that Ron Brown needs to get these receivers coached up on downfield blocking because we're leaving points on the field. But there were some downfield holding calls right on the receivers. I mean, we had phantom blocks in the back that were getting called. Like, they show the replay and there's nobody around. Like, what the hell were these officials seeing?
I don't know what they were seeing. If I was that bad at my job, I wouldn't have a job tomorrow.
Well, you'd be fired.
You'd be fired. It wasn't just a call here. It was how many calls was it that were it was just insane. Yeah, they should be ashamed of themselves as a whole group. And that's all I want to say about it. I think you guys know it if you want. Leave it at that. It was an embarrassing performance. They should be ashamed.
I think that it was definitely a case of influencing the game in a sense of wanting to put their own interpretation of the rules on it. And that's, again, it differs conference to conference. That's kind of why they bring in the away teams refs in non-conference road games. But at the end of the day, like, a pancake block's a pancake block and holding is pretty much holding. Like, there's a little bit of interpretation, but usually it's, it when you see it. But this crew didn't know a damn thing. And they, the biggest telltale sign was they had some calls where they were obvious makeup calls. But it's so obvious where it's like, just call it right the first time. And we don't even have to have this conversation.
Yeah, well, was it the late hit on Dylan or the roughing that it didn't look like it? To me, as a Nebraska fan, it didn't look like it. And it clearly looked like it was just a makeup call.
And then I'll be honest, I thought LeJontay Wester's catch was a catch. I looked at that and I heard later when I rewatched the game that Paul Burmeister and Colt McCoy were like, yeah, I thought that was a catch too. I'm happy that they didn't call it a catch, obviously. But this officiating crew, they were way out over their skis. They did not know what they were doing.
Mike with the great comment here. How about the 5-minute delay just for the officials to decide what the penalty was? Like, that went on for that. That got the fans so frustrated that we were booing just out of just make a call, because at that point they threw a flag. They all conferred, but no call was ever given. And it's like, you have to be like, how are you just going to, oh, no, we're going to throw a foul or throw the flag, and then we'll figure out what we're throwing the flag for. That's what that situation was.
And, I'm just going to say this, and I'm not, because I agree with Jake. I'm not a blame the refs guy a lot of the time. It's like, you make your own luck.
You should spend some time in terrestrial radio. I blamed the refs a lot when I was calling sports.
The thing that gets me is, this is just an observation. Just everybody take it for what it is. A lot of those calls were always made as the play was along the CU sideline. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not saying that there's undue influence, gambling, money change hands, whatever. I'm just saying that I think that there is an inherent bias that takes place. And I think, they may not even be aware of it at that point. That's all I'm going to say.
I do like this. I put it up here earlier. Megan McKenzie said officials got a Venmo transfer during halftime. It does seem like that's when a lot of things kind of flipped. And I also, saw something earlier, not in this chat, but, the refs were gifted Rolexes before the game or at halftime or something like that. Anyway, yeah, it was bad.
I like Terrence Knighton, by the way. After the game, he saw a camera go on him, and he did like the Shadur. You bring it on yourself, man. If you want to do stuff like that, you got to be willing when you're getting trolled, when you're losing. Yep. You got to be ready to take the smoke. If you're gonna chirp and talk and flash your Rolex, that whatever. If people make fun of you for it, and I mean, that's just the way it is, man.
Hey, live with the consequences.
Scott over on Facebook says it's because the officials had the under. Not going to read that one, Rostovsky. We this is a clean show. Come on now, be better. No, I'm kidding. I would, but I'm tired.
Yeah. What do you say we you remind us what Jake and I's predictions were or are for Northern Iowa, and we call it a night.
I will do that. I do have a couple comments here that I did want to that I've highlighted. It was great to see Bud Crawford out there sporting the Nebraska WWE replica titles. WWE's Big E, who, by the way, is an Iowa grad, was at the game with Bud Crawford. And WWE was doing, I saw on their social media, they were mentioning the Nebraska game a lot in the Cornhuskers in a very positive light. Get your thought. I don't know how often you guys follow or how close you follow recruiting, but Tiger Shark Diver said, I wonder if that tight end commit Chase Lofton from Miller South is rethinking his Florida State commitment. Which prompted Jason Reeves to say everybody's rethinking their FSU commitment right now.
Yeah. Hey, go get him if he is.
Let's see. This is the one I mentioned right at the beginning. DJ Cruz says, I hugged Tommy Hill when I rushed the field.
You know, I'm happy. I mentioned this to you, Greg, on the phone today.
Mm-hmm.
DJ, I'm happy that you rushed the field. I'm so tired of certain segments of this fan base saying act like you've been there before, because guess what? There's a large majority of this fan base that have come of age and are now the next generation of boosters, donors, and diehard fans that we haven't been there before. So
it's a new experience for the DJ Cruzies of the world. But I did like the event security who were interlocking elbows around the goalpost. As John Johnston has said on a couple occasions, you're not getting those goalposts out no matter what you do. Like I don't know if they would snap at the ground, but you're not excavating the goalposts anymore. Let's see, John. I'm gonna say, I hope it's rotten, not rotten, but I drink the Kool-Aid on Dylan Ravioli, and it is amazing. Michael Hassman says playing all the young players builds depth for the long haul. You need the depth in today's college football. Hey, look, getting freshmen is. What's that?
I agree with Michael on this one.
I was just going to say, getting freshmen and sophomores in-game experience now is going to help them when they're juniors and seniors, because it won't be, too big for them. You guys were talking, I don't want to say highly, but at least respectfully about Travis Hunter a little bit ago. And Wrinkly Beef, which, by the way, is just a tremendous name, says, I still think Hunter is a stud, although hoping the Heisman talk around Sanders is over. I think he got exposed.
Time's up, buddy.
Well, and
not you.
No, I know.
He's shaky. He's paranoid in the pocket.
But what happens with that is the reason that he was so underwhelming last night is because of our front seven. They were eating his lunch almost every play. Like, he had no time to get comfortable at all. And that was, again, kudos to, the defense. Let's see. We talked a little bit about a little bit of luck or some good things happening for Nebraska. And Fred says that bobble pass to a touchdown made me think we were going to drop 60 on Colorado, like everything was going our way. And it was until halftime.
I did too.
Josh and I were like, I can't believe this is happening. That was our shared sentiment there. High Mountain Guy says having a stud QB who secures the ball and a capable program building coach is a hell of a drug. Who doesn't feel good? Now let's find a kicker.
Long snapper.
Yeah, we didn't address that necessarily tonight. It needs to be revisited, right? I mean, we kind of talked at the outset. Brian Buschini had 5 punts, averaged over 50 yards, had put the defense in some really tremendous situations. We talked about, that pick 6 by Tommy Hill very early. That was because Brian Buschini pinned Colorado deep. But the rest of the game is kind of woof. And even go ahead.
I think I saw a long snap skip off the turf at one point on the way to the punter. And there is just something where it's like we took Marco Ortiz for granted last year, how solid he is.
Mm-hmm.
It was. And so that's something that's got to get fixed moving forward. I'm glad that we have Northern Iowa instead of Illinois this week. So get a tune-up. And I like what Rule said. It's the best kind of game. You got to win. There's a lot to work on.
BFOTS Josh Hansen, our best friend of the show, says, well, fucking said Haas. Now, he said that 3 minutes ago, so I'm not entirely sure which part he was agreeing to, but we'll just say probably all of it.
I think it was about the acting like you've been there before.
It was right after you said that because I saw it pop up. So,
but speaking of Northern Iowa, what are we looking at here, Greg?
Well, do you guys remember your score predictions for the Colorado game?
I said 45-31.
49-28.
You did, Haas, but you also said last week that you're like, it could also be 31-3.
Son of a bitch.
So if we're going for zeroing in on accuracy, I'd give you the 31-3 because that's pretty damn close.
Yeah, I would love to take the credit here. I really would, but I'm in the spirit of good faith. I'm going to stick with the official one.
By the way, you caught this last week on the show, Haas, but Jake, maybe for you, I said we'd win 52-14. So
yeah, I
thought we were going that route too.
I mean, realistically, after the first half, it was seeming like a possibility. All right, so just to recap or remind you guys for Northern Iowa, Haas obviously wins across the border. The predictions, Haas, you said 48-12. Jake, you said 45-14.
Yep.
So same ballpark, roughly.
Yeah. And I, again, say a win, and I'll give my score Thursday night. So
right.
While we're talking about next week, Josh does have one question for you guys. How bad does Bama beat Whiskey next week? He says by 45.
Have you ever seen the movie Ghost in the Darkness, or has any of the listeners seen the movie Ghost in the Darkness?
I've not.
So it's about the Savo lions, the Barbary lions that were killing people as they were trying to build a railroad across Africa. And Val Kilmer kills a lion. He's got a 45 caliber Springfield rifle that he kills it with. There's a guy that works on the railroad, a native African, who also killed the lion. And Val Kilmer asks him, Mahine, what'd you kill the lion with? I mean, like, what kind of gun? And Mahine just goes with his own two hands. That's Alabama. Wisconsin's the line. Alabama Tide rolls by 45. I agree.
Fred says Ghost in the Darkness is a game at Camp Kenosha. Not a week goes by where Fred doesn't have a Northwestern reference.
And I love Fred. He caught my Sopranos reference earlier about no scraps in my scrapbook. Him and I had a conversation on Friday night about Sopranos references. So, Fred.
We're not the only fan base represented tonight that's celebrating. G.I. Jacob says, Oklahoma State fan here. Glad to see Nebraska back. I love it when old Big A schools do well, and Nebraska's fan base deserves the win we saw on Saturday. And, hey, Okie State had a nice win yesterday as well over Arkansas. So, all right. I believe we have come to that point. Oh, by the way, Josh says, look at that dog.
Yeah, that is my dog.
And it was odd because you brought the dog in about the time the Haas was talking about a movie where a guy kills a lion with his bare hands. So I was like, I'm getting nervous.
No, yeah. He's actually a pretty decent sized dog. He just looks, not that I'm like the biggest guy, but he looks small in my hands because I'm just kind of like big. But yeah, he's not like a tiny dog.
You are a massive individual, Jake. It's
calling you small is like saying Shadeur is a good quarterback. It's just not. It doesn't compute.
There you go, Highlander gun with the dog emoji. So, all right, that'll do it for this episode of the Coronation Overreaction. We'll be back next week after University of Northern Iowa game, and we will, God willing, the creek don't rise, be celebrating a Nebraska team that is 3-0 for the first time since when, Haas? 16?
16.
All right. like refresh my memory so that as we go along, I don't have to ask every week, but when did we get our first loss in the 2016 season?
In late October to Wisconsin. Halloween weekend, I believe.
Was that 8, 9? No, 8-0?
No, we were 7-0.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe history will repeat itself, but maybe a little extended to this. Anyway, we will get talking about that 3, 4, 5 weeks down. I don't know. I've lost count. All right. That is it for this episode. Big game, Jake. Thank you, brother, for coming on, and we look forward to visiting with you in other big games. And by the way, when we hit end stream, you don't have to disappear right away like you did a couple weeks ago. You can hang out and visit for a couple minutes. It's okay.
Okay. All right.
I want to tell you that now because otherwise you're wrong. Hoss, great seeing you, man. Great seeing you in the flesh the last couple of days, and like breaking bread with you and just talking ball and walking Haymarket. Yeah, so many memories. I'm glad I got as many pictures as I did. I didn't even take as many as I could have, but this weekend when I'm, in my dementia years, which are probably sooner than I think I'll always remember this weekend. I almost said November, September 6th, 7th, and 8th, 2024, the 398th consecutive sellout of Nebraska's Memorial Stadium. For everybody at Coronation, to all of you, you filthy animals and beyond, go Big Red. Hoss.
Win the damn game.